I think that maybe we will start the session, if that sounds okay. We've got a few people here in the room, so I'd just like to welcome you all. This is the second of two sessions that we're running on the around mental health. This has been hosted by the U21 Health Sciences Group Mental Health Working Group. So I'd really like to welcome you all. Thank you for coming along today. My name is Vivian Brown. I am the Associate Director of Government Relations and Policy, actually, at an organisation called Origin, which is a youth mental health research centre attached to the University of Melbourne in Australia. I'm also the chair of the U21 Health Science Group Mental Health Working Group that I mentioned before. I'm joined in hosting this session by my colleague on that group, Professor Stuart Carney, who's the Medical Dean of the University of Queensland. Thanks for the wave, Stuart. So as I said, this is the second of two sessions that's hosted by our group. The group itself, just a little bit of context, was established following the U21 Health Sciences Group Annual Meeting back in 2018 that was hosted in Melbourne. And at the end of that meeting, there was a decision made to develop up a declaration for supporting mental health in U21 universities. So that followed on a number of presentations and a program that was delivered looking specifically at mental health and university students. The declaration itself was launched at the Dublin U21 Health Sciences Group meeting last year, after a process of a couple of years of development and attaining the President's endorsement as well. And so for this session, we're actually focusing specifically on postgraduate or higher research students and supporting their mental health and wellbeing. They're a group that's often been discussed as being at high risk of experiencing stress, distress and poor wellbeing. There was probably an even more recent survey of around 3,500 graduate students at 12 public universities during COVID pandemic, which has shown that, again, some of these risk factors have been exacerbated with almost 70% of survey responses in that research reporting scores very low on wellbeing and around 35% with moderate or higher levels of depression. So today we're going to hear presentations from the University of Queensland and UC Davis in California, and specifically on their research and work looking at graduate student mental health and wellbeing. As this session is going to be hosted in a Zoom meeting format, I'd like to ask that everyone put themselves on mute and use the chat function to ask questions while the presentations are occurring. We'll either get to them after each presentation or we'll collate them and ask questions at the end in a Q&A session. So firstly, I'd like to welcome Belinda Byrne and Dr. Stacey Parker from the University of Queensland. I'm really thrilled that they're able to join us. In Australia at the moment, it's 6 a.m. in the morning, so it's been a very early start with lots of coffee already. Belinda's the director of UQ Graduate School and Stacey's the director of the Centre of Business and Organisational Psychology at UQ. So their work has been to understand more deeply the factors contributing to positive HDR experience, including indicators of wellbeing and engagement and factors that should contribute to these positive experiences. So with that, it's enough of me talking. I'm going to hand over to Stacey and Belinda to take it from here.
Thanks, Vivian, and hello, everybody. Thanks for inviting us along today. We're really pleased to be able to talk to you about a project that we only initiated about 18 months ago, but it's showing some really, it's valuable work and it's showing some really early interesting results. So we're keen to see where it goes. This project is a bit of a collaboration with staff and some PhD research partners across UQ. Myself and another member of our higher degree by research committee also worked with some researchers and some PhD students from a few different areas across UQ, including Stacey, of course, as well. So it's a big project team, 12 people altogether, and we really came together to more deeply understand not just the contributing factors, I guess, to mental health and other issues with well-being and engagement for HDR students, but we really in particular wanted to see what were those links between different aspects of their research culture, their research environment, supervision. We looked at career identity and a range of other things, just to be able to get a more complete picture and really to look at what things most impacted on the wellbeing of our students right now. And so we did extensive literature reviews, and we looked at other surveys and data that was out there, and we built our own survey, I guess. It's designed as a longitudinal survey, so we're looking to run this every year. It ran for the first time in November last year, so we ran it just with our UQ cohort, and we're looking to do that again in November this year. And we'll take you through some of our recommendations and next steps towards the end of the presentation. I think I might be handing over to Stacey now.
Yes, thank you, Belinda. So just first to describe a little bit of our sample from 2020. We got a total of 746 respondents, which is about 16% of our whole student cohort. So not quite as much of a response rate as we were hoping, but it was in the midst of the 2020 pandemic. And what was very reassuring was that the sample was still quite representative of our cohort across a range of different factors like degree type, international domestic student status, and other factors. So first, I'm just going to take you through some distribution plots of the main outcomes we looked at, which were wellbeing and engagement outcomes. As already highlighted, we have a focus on some of those more positive general wellbeing indicators, as well as some factors related to engagement like motivation and satisfaction, as well as some of the more mental ill health issues that our HDRs can encounter. And what we're seeing in our data in general is that there is some slightly higher than the midpoint sort of life satisfaction, meaning in life and resilience in the cohort. And overall, they're much more intrinsically motivated in terms of their motivation for their studies. But satisfaction is a little bit more mixed across the cohort. And nevertheless, they do still have some significant experiences in terms of burnout, as well as loneliness and psychological distress. I'll just note these last two are measured actually on the 5-point scale rather than the 7. So that is around the mean point there, that midpoint there, that level of loneliness and distress. Then we also wanted to look into the predictors of those outcomes, and we looked at a range of factors, as Belinda started to allude to. And we used a novel type of analytic technique to look into this data, which is cross-sectional survey data measured at one point in time. So we use what's called a network analysis. And so this first network I'm showing you is those outcomes I showed you the distributions of before, including some of the more sort of negative factors and some of the more positive factors. And the lines between these indicate the nature of the association between them. So blue is positive. So if I feel more satisfied with my life overall, I tend to also feel I have more meaning in life. And the negative lines are a negative association. So it tends not to be the case that you're both satisfied with your HDR and simultaneously burnt out. These tend to be inversely correlated. And what we found is that the factors of psychological distress and HDR satisfaction and also life satisfaction have some of the strongest interconnections in this wellbeing and engagement network. So these might be particularly significant outcomes to focus on. What we did next, but was we overlaid this network with different categories of our predictors. And so what I'm going to show you next is our category for the support resources that we investigated. So we have the same wellbeing and engagement outcomes as before, which are appearing in the orange and blue. And now in green, we have the support resources that we were interested in seeing. To what extent do they explain wellbeing and engagement outcomes? And you can see that this analysis is taking into account the intercorrelations among our outcomes, but also the intercorrelations among our predictors. So it's just taking into account that the shared sort of associations here. The most pertinent outcomes that were revealed was that HDR peer support, so support from peers at the university, was linked to lower loneliness, whereas personal support outside of the university, friends and families, partner, was associated with lower loneliness, but also greater life satisfaction. And of the various advisor-related resources that we looked into, it was the principal advisor support that was linked to greater levels of HDR satisfaction. That was the most sort of significant finding there, rather than other factors that we looked into, like financial support, autonomy, or associate advisor support. We also looked into how our students are integrating their study and life, looking at a range of different factors, like whether they're integrators or segmenters, whether they're experiencing conflict, whether they feel like it's authentically in balance, how they like it, and also the things that they're doing to sort of manage their energy, so how they approach each day to make sure they can face it with a fresh pair of eyes, which is this proactive vitality management, as well as various things they can do in their leisure time to recover, which helps to prevent things like burnout. And what we found is that they are experiencing conflict, which is associated with more burnout and psychological distress, which is just here. But the more they're feeling like the way they're doing the juggle is authentic with their values, the more satisfied they are overall with their HDR experience. They're also more intrinsically motivated and have lower burnout. And interestingly, the people who are more actively trying to manage their energy, they have greater resilience, greater meaning in life, and intrinsic motivation as well. Of the different little recovery approaches we studied, it was relaxation experiences and downtime that were the most important, associated with less loneliness and psychological distress. We also looked into their broader context within their units, so within schools and institutes, looking at a range of factors to do with the culture of those units, including the research culture. And some of the factors that we looked into in relation to research culture were not significantly associated directly with wellbeing and engagement outcomes, but they certainly drive other factors that were. In particular, a sense that there's high publication pressure was associated with greater burnout, as well as psychological distress, the lines just underneath the graph there. But experiencing a greater sense of belongingness in your local unit was linked to lower levels of loneliness. Also, units that supported the segmentation of work and life without pressure to work all the time or be on all the time was linked to lower burnout. And finally, we also looked into some career and identity factors, looking at things to do with, is the experience of their HDR more positive or more negative than what they expected? Are they confident to complete? Do they feel like a competent researcher? What are they thinking about in terms of their career prospects in the future? Experiencing the HDR as more positive than expected was linked to greater satisfaction and lower burnout. So there's something there about having good expectations about what is involved. Feeling like a competent researcher was associated with less burnout, while confidence to complete more satisfaction and meaning in life. Career distress, which is worry about not knowing what to do in terms of your career in the future, was associated with more psychological distress. But thinking that you've got good prospects because you're developing good transferable skills was associated with more intrinsic motivation, and feeling like that career, the future looks bright, more meaning in life. Interestingly, of the identity factors we looked into, it was holding a student identity that was associated with more intrinsic motivation, and those who want to stay in academia also with more intrinsic motivation. Now I'll pass back to Belinda to talk about our recommendations and next steps.
Thanks, Stacey. So you can see there are it's a lot of data that we were able to obtain even just in this early phase, and we're thinking of this as our pilot stage. But you can see that those outcomes and indicators are starting to link to support for the person, development and resources for the person. Studying a research by higher degree program, we're also starting to look at then the research environment factors, and also, as Stacey described, the impact on their advisor or their supervisory team. So, so you can see that we've started to think about some recommendations and changes we might suggest in those categories. I mean, most immediately, we obviously want to make sure that people have got good support and access to counsellors as needed. We do have that support at UQ. Our research students access that through our student services unit, but we do sort of hear that sometimes there's difficulty obtaining that quickly enough, or being able to see the same person on a repeat visit. So we wanted to look into what we could do to enable that, and make sure that the counsellors were familiar with the unique context of the higher degree by research as opposed to an undergraduate student. So, so we're making some recommendations there. Other things to do with the student perspective around how they progress. So through their program, and obviously a PhD is 3 to 4 years. Well, not obviously, but it is a longer program, and for us it is around that time length. So we are looking at ways that we help people progress and have that formative, not just assessment, but also indication of support and advice along the way. So we have annual milestones, but we're looking at can we make those clearer and more consistent for students across the university. We have 4,800 research higher degree students across UQ, and there does seem to be variation in the ways that we monitor their progress and give them feedback at the moment. Also looking at right back at the beginning, that relationship between their supervisor, how that develops, and how we can develop or set some clearer and more focused sort of expectations at that stage. So can we actually have a clear conversation and signal what some clear shared expectations could be at that stage. In terms of the candidates' development and other resources we could provide, we're thinking around expanding on the wellbeing options that we currently provide. So we do have our student services team do offer a number of targeted sessions for research students at this time, but we're looking at what else could be done. Could those be expanded? We do offer that 2-day mental health first aid course. We pay for that for any research student who wishes to undertake that as well. But what else could we be doing in terms of our, the CDF is our career development framework. So we do have a suite of offerings already that we make available to every research student across the university. And they're designed to be sort of general, I guess, and not discipline specific, but really targeting those transferable skills that Stacey was mentioning around professional skills, personal communication skills, and also some research skills as well. So we're looking at, can we expand those? Can we also expand the career advising support around those as well? And we know that research students are all coming with different backgrounds, different career journeys as well. So we want to see a consistent and really, well-developed individual development plan that could be used for every student to really signal that conversation at the beginning with their supervisory team. What do they need? And that can be updated ideally along the way, but really is customised for them. In terms of research environment, and Stacey was describing some of those outcomes we were seeing there that really sat at the local level, and we're cognizant that we've got lots of local environments. So what can we do to just make sure that we're seeing things that we know make a difference actually, be developed and improved. So we want to do some local scans and a needs analysis there. We're thinking of a tool or something we could use to help our colleagues in each area look at those things. We're looking at that importance of the peer network, as you heard Stacey mention. How can we strengthen those? We've got student leaders and representatives, and we've got a postgraduate student society. So how can we sort of activate those and make sure that peer network's around for every student? And space came up as a big issue. I should say our student partners actually had a very strong voice in us developing these, and they had a range. The 6 students had a range of different experiences, and it's that sense of community, I guess, when we were talking about space being co-located again with peers and in that local research community. Makes a big difference. And then onto the supervisory team, and in particular the principal supervisor. We want to again make sure that everybody has access to mental health awareness training. We have a short course as well as the 2-day first aid course, so we're looking to make sure people engage with those more. Supervisor development, so we do have a program that every principal supervisor will need to do to renew on our register, and happy to talk more about that with anybody at another time. But that program's designed to keep people updated and to make sure that people are aware of significant things impacting their supervision, including boundaries, relationships, mental health awareness, and career and development of the candidates. So we want to just make sure there's a stronger focus there on supporting wellbeing and that work-life balance that Stacey was also talking about as well. We've got supervision awards, so we're looking at ways we can make nurturing and supporting HDR students a little more overt in those, and also we're thinking of a community of practice targeted for the supervision of research students. So obviously sharing best practice and ideas there. Next step, so we're reporting to a couple of committees, the UQ Mental Health Strategy Board next week. We've reported to our HDR committee as well recently, and we're now presenting these findings as well to some key stakeholders around the university, talking through some feedback people have, but also how we can shape these. And some of this work is already underway in some shape or form, but how can we partner and work together to implement some more of these recommendations? As I mentioned at the beginning, this is designed to be what we hope will be a successful longitudinal study. So we're looking to run this again in November. We've also been talking with colleagues at UQ to adapt an ECR version, so an early career researcher version, which I think you can probably see there are a number of parallels there in how we support our newer research colleagues as well. So we're looking to do that. If not this year, then definitely next year. Thank you. That's all.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Belinda and Stacey. I found that so interesting, and actually kind of, think about a lot of the recommendations coming out and how it could actually apply to lots of workplaces as well, actually, in terms of what people need, taking that person-centered approach to supporting their wellbeing, understanding what sort of motivates people to have a good experience within that journey too. Certainly aligns really well with the U21 declaration to putting students and staff and universities at the centre of everything we do. So thank you. We won't hold off questions and go to Elizabeth next, and then we can have some Q&A at the end, if that's okay with everyone. I'd really like to introduce you to Elizabeth Sturdy, who is from UC Davis in California. We've got a pre-recorded presentation actually from Elizabeth with Professor Carolyn Dewar as well for this session today, but Elizabeth's joining us live for the Q&A at the end, which is great. So they have a pre-recorded presentation on the work that they've been doing to develop and deliver a faculty of Faculty Academy of Graduate Student Wellbeing, which trains members across the faculty of UC Davis to deliver graduate student seminars on mental health and wellbeing within graduate programs, and looking at a train the trainer model as well. So I'll hand over to Diego, if you're able to share the screen and play the pre-recorded video, that would be great.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation to speak to you all today. Today, we wanted to share with you a little bit about the Faculty Academy of Graduate Student Wellbeing at UC Davis. I'm Elizabeth Sturdy, Director of Mentoring and Academic Success Initiatives for Graduate Studies at UC Davis. And I'm joined by Professor Carolyn Diwa. Do you want to introduce yourself, Carolyn?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. I'm a professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Public Health Sciences. And we're really glad to be able to share what we're doing here at Davis.
So we just wanted to start out by sharing a little bit about what's happening with graduate student well-being in the US. So the Council of Graduate Schools just issued a report that about a third of graduate students are reporting symptoms consistent with PTSD, anxiety, or depression. They found that anti-Blackness, the pandemic, and career uncertainty were all factors. We also know at UC Davis, we've done surveys that our students are struggling. So well-being is becoming more of an important topic than ever. There was also a recent report done in the US this year about the role of faculty in supporting student mental health. They found that 2 in 10 professors did report that supporting a student's well-being did impact their own mental health. About 30% were experiencing symptoms of depression of their own. And only about half understood how to recognize a student that was struggling, and a majority wanted more professional development on this topic.
So this course that we're talking about in the Academy really comes out of experience that I had at doing gatekeeper training for mental health. And one of the professors who took the gatekeeping course contacted me and was fairly persistent in wanting to have a course for her students. And so this is what emerged from it, that course, that there was a needs assessment with her students. So it wasn't public health, it was plant biology where we started, and genetics. And they wanted a course for their first year cohorts coming in. And so this is what we have, the graduate wellbeing course. It is, and we've given it 3 times. So once before the pandemic and twice during the pandemic. And what we cover is, it's a 5-week session, and we cover what well-being means. We take a public health approach, so how to promote mental health, and then we go into some self-care and how to address stress as a graduate student. And so we go over tools. The thing about this course is, because it is a seminar course, we also go into the science behind it. Interestingly, we're talking to plant biology and genetics students. So the study design and the methodology that we often use in social sciences to study this is new to them. So we also go into some of the study design and how do you know it's a good paper, and if it was rigorously done. So it combines that, how to evaluate the evidence. And so one of the things that we got feedback was that it helped legitimize some of the tools that they've been hearing about. So we talk about that. We also talk about self-efficacy and self-care, the evidence for that and how it promotes mental health. We talk about problem-solving tools, conflict resolution, and the psychosocial work environment, work-life balance. So when we, why are we talking to graduate students? At the end of every, in the beginning and the end of each course, we have questionnaires. We also, they have a final assignment, which is an essay in which they're asked to answer 3 questions. 1, what did they learn? 2, how did they use it? And 3, how they will use it as TAs. So how they will pass it on, and to have them start thinking about how it could benefit the students that they teach and they touch. And so some of the things that came out from these essays are what their experiences have been like. And so in the bold is the summation, and underneath it are quotes from the essays. Students find that their usual coping mechanisms that they went to before graduate school don't necessarily work while they're in graduate school. And part of that may be because of the compounded stress that they face from different dimensions while they're in school. They also talk about feeling overwhelmed and hopeless. And it's wearing, graduate school is wearing, because you don't often, when you're in the middle of it, see the end and how you're going to get through it. You just see the challenges, and that takes a toll on their well-being. So next slide. They also find when they're in the middle of things that graduate school can be discouraging. And sometimes as they're working on things, it seems that maybe it's of importance to them and maybe their advisor, but who else will find their work significant? And that can be discouraging. There's constant self-doubt, where I found this to be a very, one of the quotes that I came away with and think about a lot, that the student describes every success feels like a total shock, and every failure feels like it is to be expected. And so there is that self-doubt and that they constantly face. At the same time, they don't really have time to reflect. They don't have time because we're on a quarter system, which is 10 weeks, which goes by very quickly. And so they don't have time to look up and maybe step back and think about what they're doing and how to approach it and how to take the context. And that also doesn't give them much time to think about their well-being and how to take care of themselves. So it is a challenging time for them as graduate students. So in the course, we found we weren't sure whether it would work using Zoom. The first iteration of the course was face-to-face. We had about 30 students in a room. We weren't sure about whether that contact over Zoom would be helpful. And what we did find was about 75% thought it helped with these challenges and the stress that they found during COVID. They also found that interaction, even though it was by Zoom, was very, very helpful. And they found that was over 85% said that. And part of that is because I think the breakout sessions, the breakout rooms that we're able to have in Zoom, they can talk in a safe place without professors overhearing or anybody else overhearing, and which we can't do in a large room because you can't get that space. And so that was one of the unexpected benefits of Zoom. And then about 90% or over 90% thought this was important, that the department offers this. So they thought it was important because it signaled that the department was interested in their well-being. They didn't have to take the course on their own time during lunch or after classes. It was offered as a class. It's a 1-unit class that they're able to take. And so there was the reassurance that the department was carving out time for them to understand and gain these skills about their well-being. So, in addition to the tools, they talked about it reinforced that self-care was important. A lot of the things that we cover in class, they hear about in popular press. You pick up a magazine, you turn on the TV, there's always something about well-being and stress. But they had, the thing that was different was that it was organized and it was reinforced. And they had peers to help reinforce how important it was. Next slide. And that peer and the social network was so important because it helped them understand that they weren't alone. It normalized the feelings of stress and discouragement, that it was a common thing to the graduate experience. And because we, in the second and third iteration of the courses, we had physics, chemistry, math, biology, the different departments together, they saw and understood that they weren't alone in what they were feeling and the doubt that they felt. And they could help with the tools to structure it, to problem solve, and how to address it. And they learned from one another, and that enriched their experiences, and they made friends and connections across the campus. And so this last quote is really summarizes what we were trying to do with the course and what they got out of it. Because they're graduate students and we used a research-based approach, they saw the value, and it was data informed, it was scientifically backed, there was evidence-based solutions, and they saw the evidence. Now, my research is on workplace and mental health. And so the evidence that we looked at was the evidence that you would hope to see if you introduce this into workplace. For example, productivity, the outcomes are work related. So it wasn't just symptoms, which are important, but they also saw some more concrete outcomes that were relevant to them. The opportunity to discuss the topics was also important. So we are doing this again. And so hoping to offer this course to more students, we have an academy in which we have a cohort of 19 faculty who step forward and want to understand the course content to be able to deliver the course this coming year. The other thing that we're trying to do is build a community of faculty so that we can exchange ideas, people who have like-minded and are looking to achieve the same objectives of student well-being in their programs. And so we are in the midst of it. We had our first day yesterday, and we had very, very interesting discussions. Elizabeth, do you want to talk about some of your impressions?
Yeah, it was just so exceptional to get faculty across all disciplines. We had all of our 4 colleges represented, as well as our professional schools. So a real variety in discipline, and also a variety in seniority of different professors that were participating, but they were all so passionate about supporting graduate student well-being. So it's been a really exciting experience so far.
So we're looking forward to it. We're hoping to expand it next year. So if you're interested, please contact Elizabeth and she can give you more details.
All right. Thank you so much. And now we can take some time for questions.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. That was amazing. Thanks, Elizabeth. And good to see, actually, there's so many linkages too between the 2 presentations, picking up some of those themes around peer support and you know, opportunities for self-care and taking time to, you know, find opportunities to relax and look after themselves as well. So I really appreciate that presentation from yourself and Caroline. That's great. So maybe we've got 5 minutes left, and I might throw over to Stuart to sort of ask a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Thank you very much. 2 excellent presentations, and please encourage sort of colleagues to add any questions to the chat function so I can sort of ask them on your behalf. But whilst you're thinking of questions to pose to our presenters, I'm going to start with Belinda and Stacey, and I know you're joining us at the University of Queensland next week at our UQ Mental Health Strategy Board. I think one of the findings that surprises me most from your work is the high level, or the higher than average level of well-being experienced by HDR students. Of course, it shouldn't surprise me given the great work that you do within the UQ Graduate School. But in these straitened economic times, how do we make the case then that we need to invest further in student well-being if we're already seeing higher than average levels of well-being in this cohort?
Linda, I'm happy to answer. So it's actually something we need to consider, that this data was measured in 2020. And actually this pattern where people are engaged and happy, but also burnt out and exhausted and distressed, is evident in employee data as well, like the Gallup poll. It's the first time that's ever been observed, for example. So I think everyone sort of is in emergency mode. They've been coping with a lot that's going on for a long time now with the pandemic. You know, that's, you know, only going to go so far. You can sort of operate at that level. So I think we do need to keep that in mind. But I would also say that I think doing a PhD is a bit like that as well, because it's this it can be incredibly intrinsically motivating and rewarding. People often choose it to do something, to sort of change their life, or to do something they think is meaningful or significant. But at the same time, it has significant challenges that can also be very distressing, you know, can exhaust you, burn you out. And also sometimes it can be quite lonely. So it does sort of have these two faces. And so we probably do have a little bit of work to do to address some of those more negative experiences. Something we didn't share was that we also asked them about that expectation of the PhD being more positive or negative than what they originally expected. And the mean for that is actually in the negative. So more of our cohort is saying it's actually a bit more negative than I thought when I think about it overall.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And mindful of the time, I'm going to move to Elizabeth, if I may, and ask around sort of. I'll pick up the question around sort of protected time for students to attend the workshop and for faculty, but also extending that, if I may. I'm sort of particularly mindful of the data you presented at the beginning of the presentation around the impact of supporting others on staff mental health, and what strategies are you putting in place to reduce the impact on staff of being part of this community of supporters?
Yeah, great question. So the course is a seminar course, so more of an elective that students are taking for about 1 unit. So there are cases where that can't be a challenge. We were addressing them earlier today, particularly our master's students. Their coursework only are really accelerated programs. We talked about different times for longer programs where there are key phases where the students would really benefit from this content and they have a little more flexibility. We also started talking about building it into extended orientation programming for first years so that they could get these tools and strategies early. So it is up to the departments to really strategize about what's best for their students. We do give them flexibility on when they want to offer it. And then that allows them to kind of address a certain phase that they're interested in, or cohort, and what like the course dynamics are for their particular discipline. The faculty did volunteer to take on teaching this seminar. So there is an acknowledgement that it is additional teaching. We do compensate them with some research academic funds, and then are advocating that they do get teaching credit and additional recognition for that service. The faculty are learning a lot because they're going through the program currently, and they're getting all of the resources and strategies and tools to use for well-being, which are more universal, and they're not tailored just to students. And so they're really learning strategies for themselves, which was a goal of our academy, and for them to be leaders within their programs for other faculty and other students, someone that they can go to that has resources or some more experience with this field.
Excellent. Thank you, Elizabeth. And will you be monitoring the impact on faculty as well?
So yeah, we're gonna be having ongoing consultations and meetings with them throughout the year. We're gonna follow up after their courses. We have 2 professionals that they can consult with throughout the year, so we're not abandoning them after this training. They'll have ongoing support throughout the year, and we'll be doing surveys as well.
Excellent, thank you. And if I may now turn to Belinda and Stacey, and talk, if you wouldn't mind talking about the faculty support that you have within the UQ Graduate School. What strategies are you putting in place, or are you proposing around supporting those supervisors in particular?
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. I think a couple of things there, and I take note about the impact on time as well. And it was interesting, some of our staff partners, Stacey will remember the discussion around, what we recommend. We do need to be careful, and we don't want to adversely impact on people, even though it's well intended. So we do have a supervisor development program, as I alluded to before, and we're mindful of it not taking up too much time. We're only making that a mandatory set of modules every 5 years, but to be done in a community sort of local unit sort of cohort environment, but alongside that, we've got a number of non-compulsory and voluntary sessions that people can engage with. I think probably the best way we can look at this is to think also about that community of practice, and that's where we're hoping that will give that support around people when they need it, when they can engage with it, but not sort of impacting too much on people when they're really needing to focus on other things. So we're looking at ways we can put supports around without making too much mandatory, I guess, as well.
Thank you very much. I'm going to hand back to Vivian. I'm conscious of the time.
Unmute would be good. Thanks very much, Stuart. And Mary, I hope that also answered one of your questions. I know that there was another one in there for Elizabeth too, around, what was it again? Sorry, I'm just going to go and have a quick look through the thing. Students to a protected academic time for students to attend the workshop and for faculty. So maybe if you could just answer that really quickly, and then we have permission to go just a couple of minutes over, and then we'll finish up.
So the course is an elective, so it's on top of the other coursework, but the program schedules it around when would be best for them. And then the faculty program is happening right now. We haven't yet started our fall quarter, so it's officially still summer for us. And so they are not teaching currently, so we're catching them before the quarter starts.
Thanks so much for that. Yeah, well, I think that'll bring this session to a close. I just again would really like to thank Stuart, Belinda, Stacey, Elizabeth and Caroline for participating in the session today and sharing such fantastic work. I've just put a link in the chat if you want to know more about the mental health working group at U21 or the declaration. You can click on that link. In there's got the declaration, the principles, and also some case studies that we're sharing. So as I said before in the chat, we'd like to actually build that repository of great practice and research that's occurring in this space around supporting mental health and wellbeing. So hopefully that as part of the site will continue to grow, and you'll be able to access this information in between annual meetings as well as when we catch up at annual meetings. So thank you again, everyone, and take care and stay safe.